Thank you, Holly. I'm really excited to be here and be talking about this topic. I think it's so important right now with everything that's going on in the world. And so, like Holly said, I have a private practice that specializes in maternal mental health and early childhood mental health in Brighton. And I can identify with this stage of life because I have two little boys myself. And so I really feel passionate about having these services and this topic as well on a personal level and professional level. And so with that, I thought, let me go ahead and share my screen. I thought that we would start by talking a little bit about the psychology behind, hold on, let me put that the psychology behind the birth story. So why is this such a important part of our life, and why does it affect us so much when things don't go as planned? And so for the sake of this talk today, I'll be talking about moms who birth their babies, but we know that there are a lot of other kinds of moms, foster moms, adopted moms, who don't go through that process, but they have similar psychological processes that we'll talk about. So matrescence is the developmental phase of becoming a mother. And it's one that we don't really think much about, or we don't really talk much about, but it's probably the biggest identity shift that a mom will go through, is this process of becoming a mother in whatever way that happens. And it doesn't just happen overnight. We don't just wake up one day and become moms. It is a long process and identity shift that happens, even actually probably before pregnancy. But it starts when we begin to imagine what we would be like as a mom, right? When we're pregnant or before we're pregnant, we think about the baby that we might have. We have this fantasy baby or this fantasy of what motherhood will look like. Like we think about it in our minds. And it's a really important psychological process because it helps us connect with our baby. It helps us connect with our pregnancy. And so it's really important that we do that. However, when things don't go as planned, that makes it more of a sensitive thing, and we can experience some kind of grief about when things aren't the way we hoped or expected. Birth is very unpredictable, as many of us know. Things can change and go a different direction very quickly and rapidly. We know that when birth is empowering to somebody, when a mom feels empowered with her labor and delivery, that she usually that's associated with more positive feelings after birth. When a mom feels like for some reason she wasn't able to be empowered during her birth, we know that this can be associated with more negative emotional outcomes after birth. So when things don't go as planned, it's okay. It is a grief process. We think about grief, we think about a lot of people think about losing a loved one, but really grief could be there's just the loss of the fantasy, right? The loss of the birth that we thought we were going to have, or grieving the loss of the baby we thought we were going to have. Maybe our baby's drastically different than we hoped for, or we thought it was going to be like, or maybe we're just very different mom than we thought. So it's important for us to be able to process that, to make sense of it, to be able to move forward. So I'll go through this really quickly, but some of the difficult circumstances, obviously this isn't an extensive list, there could be things that aren't on here that could affect you, but some of the difficult circumstances that can affect the way we feel, that can kind of make us have more negative emotions, could be anything during pregnancy, right? It could be maybe a mom is very sick during illness, maybe things don't go, maybe she has high blood pressure, gestational diabetes, maybe there's an unexpected diagnosis of a baby, or a job loss, death of a loved one, marital conflict, or maybe a pandemic like many moms are experiencing right now, right? During birth, it could be a change of events during birth, C-section, maybe there was a traumatic situation, maybe baby had to go to the NICU after being born, maybe you just didn't get the birth that you wanted, maybe you wanted a home birth and it didn't work out that way, or you wanted a tub birth and it didn't work out. Not feeling supported by medical providers or significant others, feeling a lack of control, confusion about what's happening, having a lot of pain. All of those can contribute to some kind of birth trauma or feeling of grief afterwards. Um, during the postpartum period. So after baby's born, maybe it's just a struggle to adjust to parenthood. Parenthood is hard, right? Um, Having a fussy baby or a baby with a difficult temperament, that can affect how we feel. Breastfeeding challenges, physical pain, recovery from birth. Also, unrealistic expectations or lack of support, right? Maybe we thought we were going to be the mom that was going to be able to have the house completely cleaned and the baby happy and not fussy and everything just going perfectly. And, I don't know about you, but that's really usually not how it goes, right? Or maybe your partner has some unrealistic expectations of what you'll be able to get done during this period. A pandemic, right? I feel like the pandemic has been traumatic for all of us in different ways. I see this with a lot of the families that I work with, that it might be different, but so many of us are just struggling with how to adjust and cope with these difficult circumstances right now. Grieving our old life, right? Grieving that normalcy of how things used to be. That's okay. I think all of us are feeling that in some way. Um, the pandemic has really made things harder for us to have that social support, which we know is so important. Anybody who's having any kind of mental health struggle, social support is really important. But what we know is that, especially with young moms and new moms, that social support is incredibly important. To know that you're not alone in this is really, really vital. So not having that right now is really tough on new families. Um, so when there's an increase in feeling of isolation, which I think many people are feeling, we know that that increases postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, any kind of mood disorder. Again, trauma makes us feel like we don't have control. And I think a lot of people are feeling like in the world right now that they don't have a lot of control over things that are going on. Parental burnout, that's a big one, right? We're not getting the breaks that we once were able to have as moms. We don't get that as much, right? Maybe you have a kiddo who's doing virtual school right now, and you kind of feel like you're their secretary, and maybe you have a new baby as well. I mean, there's lots of juggling of many roles, lack of boundaries, right? If you're working from home, um, not being able to have that commute to work like you used to have, things like that. Lots of increased rates of depression and anxiety right now with this pandemic. More hypervigilance around symptoms of illness, right? So maybe you used to not bat an eye when your kiddo would cough or start to have a runny nose, but now that's a bigger deal, right? Does my kiddo have COVID? What's going to happen? Can they go to school? Can they go to daycare? And childcare is more scarce right now, and there's a lot more complications that go along with sending your kid to childcare right now. So all of these impact how we're feeling, right? Let alone if you have a new baby or if you're pregnant. Um, and then there's a pandemic going on top of that. It just contributes and compounds with the emotions of the normal adjustment to parenthood emotions that many families have. So what can we do about it? How can we cope with this difficult time and when things maybe don't go the way that we had hoped? The first thing that I always suggest is that we have to go to some place of acceptance, right? The more that we fight this and the more that we get upset about how things should be or what's wrong in the world or what's wrong with what happened, we don't move forward, and it actually causes us more suffering. The first has to be an acceptance, and acceptance doesn't mean that we are okay with what's happening or what happened. It just means we're accepting that that happened, that that is the reality. Um, all feelings are okay, even guilt and shame. And I think that that is a huge one because there really is this kind of in our society that if we have a healthy baby, that maybe we shouldn't be upset about what happened. There are these ideas and feelings that it's not okay to talk about how hard motherhood is, right? I remember when I had my first son, I had this sense of like, I studied this, right? I worked with moms in my career. And when I had my first, I felt like it was so much harder than I even thought. And I knew it was going to be hard. Um, but a lot of moms don't talk about it, right? And we feel like we need to maybe have this like to convey that things are perfect at home and things are going great, as if it means if it's hard that there's something wrong with us, right? That maybe we don't love our kid, or maybe we're not a good mom if we say and admit that it's hard. But we know that that is so important, is us to be able to speak authentically about how we're feeling and the thoughts that we're having. I see a lot of moms in my practice, and some moms will come to me and say things like, I feel so guilty for admitting this, but I really miss my old life. Or I really wonder what life would be like if I never had this baby. That doesn't mean you regret having your baby. That doesn't mean you don't love your baby. It just means that motherhood is hard and that this is a huge identity shift, whether it's your first baby or your fifth baby. It's an adjustment, right? And it's hard, and it's okay for us to process and have these weird, that may seem out of context, thoughts and feelings, right? It's okay. It doesn't mean that you're a bad mom, or it doesn't mean that you don't love your baby. So being able to speak authentically about how we're feeling to somebody who's safe, that's the important part. Maybe your partner's not the safe one to talk about with those things. Maybe it's your best friend, or maybe you need to get a therapist that you can kind of get some of these thoughts and feelings out of your head. But it's important to be able to speak them and get them out of your head. Journaling and writing a narrative of your birth story is, we know from research, has a lot of benefit for us to being able to process and heal. So if we think of this stage of life as a developmental shift, um, you think about any other big developmental shift from childhood to adolescence. When hard things happen, they really do affect us, and so it's important for us to be able to process and feel what we're experiencing. So journaling is great. Um, there's something therapeutic about being able to write things down on paper. We really recommend things like, for example, being able to write the events of your birth story or your pregnancy or whatever didn't go as planned. Writing the events with the emotions. When we can connect both of those, that's called an integrated story. And our brain needs that in order to heal. So if we find that we're having a lot of feelings about whether it's your birth or whether it's the pandemic and how much it kind of messed things up, um, that's probably a good sign that maybe you need to process that a little bit more, and maybe you need to do some journaling, or maybe you need to be able to speak authentically with somebody about what you're feeling, that maybe your brain needs a little bit more healing, especially if you've had a birth trauma, or if there's been any kind of really difficult, scary thing that happened. Sometimes our brain copes by separating the emotion from what happened. So in order for us to heal and be able to process and move forward from that, we need to connect the feelings that we had with the events, right? So those are two important parts of a healing narrative. And again, then finding a safe person to share your narrative with, whoever that might be. Um, Being able to share it, express it, and have somebody be able to authentically hear us and not judge us is really a huge step in the healing process. I also put, we want to do that in doses, right? So sometimes maybe it's not like you're gonna just hammer it out in an hour. Maybe you need to come back to it. Maybe you take a couple of weeks, a couple months off because it's really hard to go to. That's okay. Taking whatever breaks that you need. Um, I think that also it's good to think about social media. Social media is really big in our world right now, but sometimes it does not always help us. Sometimes if you notice that it's maybe causing you to feel more depressed or anxious, or maybe you're doing a lot of comparisons to other moms and thinking, why am I not like this mom? She looks so picture perfect with her new baby. Maybe it's time for a social media cleanse, I call it. Just taking a break from it. Um, Going out in nature and doing movement breaks. We call them dance parties at our house, but the movement and nature are very grounding, and they're very helpful. Especially if you maybe you've done maybe you're journaling and it's just a lot and you need a break. Go out in nature, go turn some music on and dance with your kiddos. Also, social support or therapy. If there's a virtual group, groups are great to get that social support, to know you're not alone with whatever you're processing about your birth story. Therapy, again, can be very, very helpful for that reason as well. Some of the common emotional responses that we might have if things don't go as planned would be some anger. That's very common. Feeling disconnected from your child, right? I see that a lot with moms who maybe their baby had to go to the NICU after they were born, or they maybe had C-section, not feeling that as connected as they would like with their kiddo. Sadness, feeling upset with your partner, feeling guilty, feeling like a failure. A lot of moms talk about feeling like sometimes they're feeling like their body failed them, right? I'm a mom. I should be able to birth a baby. Like, what happened here? Why did this happen? I feel like my body wasn't working with me. It failed me. All those feelings are okay. So things that we can do to support healing with this, finding a healthy release for any kind of anger that we have, whether that's journaling, whether that's art, whether that's doing martial arts or running or exercising, whatever it is. Um, Finding a way to that you can release that in a healthy way. Um, if you're feeling disconnected from your child, there's ways to reconnect with them, right? It's never too late to repair. Things may not have gone the way we wanted, but it's never too late to repair that with your child and to work on that connection. It could be playing games with your kids, like pretending. I've seen a lot of this can be helpful with pretending to be like animals that have babies, right? Maybe you pretend you're a mama bird and you have like your little ones pretend to be in eggs, and they crack out of the eggs, and you guys have this great welcoming of, oh, my babies are here in the world now. And it can be kind of like a pseudo way to heal and maybe feel like that, a little bit of that feeling that maybe you didn't get at your birth. It can be really helpful for kids. Usually love that game, and it can be really helpful for moms as well. Maybe it's writing a letter, speaking words to your child that you wished that you could have said, but didn't get a chance to say. Skin to skin contact, right? Even for older babies, it's a very healthy and nice way for them to get some of that co-regulation and to kind of get that sensation. Again, art for emotional expression is great. Writing letters, and sometimes it's letters that you don't intend to send, right? Maybe if you're very angry at your doctor, a medical provider, um, maybe it's just you vent and you write that letter and you say everything that you wish that you could have said, but you don't send it. Some moms, I've helped them with retrieving medical documents, right? Looking at documents to maybe better understand what happened. I'm still confused about what happened when I was pregnant or when I was, in labor. Like, why did this doctor, why did this provider suggest this or do this? Having a trusted healthcare provider go over those documents with you can be helpful. Finding a way to forgive ourselves and have some compassion for ourselves. Thinking about what would you say to your friend or your teenage daughter if she was in that situation. We tend to be really hard and critical on ourselves. And so finding ways to have compassion for what happened. Again, asking for help from therapists or a medical provider. It's not an issue. There should be no shame in asking for a little bit more help. Some moms may just need simple journaling, or maybe need a nice vent session with a friend or a therapist. And that might be enough for some moms. Other moms might need a little bit more, right? Like how maybe they need to keep visiting it or keep writing a narrative, or maybe the narrative consists of writing down how they feel and writing down what they wished could have happened. Maybe they need to write down that fantasy of how they wish birth and labor would have gone. Maybe they need to do more art or write letters. So whatever you need, it will be enough. It's okay if you need a little bit more than maybe somebody else does, or maybe you still have lingering feelings and one of these things doesn't completely make you feel better. That's okay. And we know that postpartum depression, anxiety, and any kind of perinatal mood disorder is more likely when we have difficult things happen around this phase of life. And so it's okay to reach out for help and to know that that does not mean you're going to have, a lifelong need to be in therapy or to, be on an antidepressant medication or an anti-anxiety medication. It just means it's a difficult phase right now and we're adjusting. So whatever you need is okay. And there's no shame in asking for more help or more resources if you need it. So since the baby fair is usually done in person, and I know that there's usually a lot of giveaways, we decided that this time we were gonna do a virtual way of doing this. So the keepsake that we have here are these journal prompts that we wrote that can help encourage people to kind of just express how they're feeling or how either the pandemic or a difficult birth or labor, whatever it was, how that has impacted them. So here are a couple of them, and my understanding is that all participants are going to be emailed these, and so you can have these and use these as you'd like. Um, so this first one says, reflection and realizations. Is there a part of your birth story that plays in your head or is on your mind more often? It's a great one to just kind of free write what maybe lingers in your mind and um, what you're thinking about related to your birth story. The next one says, how would you describe your pregnancy? How did events in pregnancy contribute to the beginning of your birth story? So, how did it? How did that affect you? How did that affect your kiddo? How did that affect how you feel about your pregnancy? How you feel about your story? How you feel about your child? Sometimes those things can impact, if you had a difficult pregnancy, it can impact things even after kiddo is here. So, thinking about that. My partner, this is the big one. How does my birth story impact my feelings toward my partner? Are there unresolved feelings toward them? How did my partner cope with events during this time? That can be a good one to talk about with your partner. Sometimes partners have very different ways of coping than you, and that's okay. And sometimes it's good to just talk about what was their perception of what happened. It could be drastically different than yours. And sometimes being able to combine those can be really helpful and can help you see your birth maybe in a different way, might reframe it for yourself. Um, Change. If you could change anything about your pregnancy, labor or birth story, what would you change and why? And then this other one, um, what was life like before baby? So what was life like when the baby arrived? How has your birth story impacted how you feel about or towards your baby? Again, knowing all feelings are okay. So those are the journal prompts, just some of them. There are more, but those were just a couple of them. Other questions and resources. This is my email address. Feel free to email me. You can also visit our website if you want to learn a little bit more about other specialized resources for moms. Postpartum Support International has a great website that has a lot of resources for anybody in the postpartum period. Some of the journal prompts too were based off of a book, How to Heal a Bad Birth. That is there's a lot of other books, but books could be also a great resource to help somebody cope and kind of find ways to think about this stage of life a little bit differently. Birthtalk.org, I believe that they may have some virtual like support groups and things like that. So these are all great resources for anybody who may have questions. With that, I will hand it over and see what kind of questions do you guys have? Okay. Do you want me to just read these from the chat? Yeah? Okay. So questions from the audience. How do I identify who a safe person to talk to is? That's a great one. Safe person to talk to would be somebody who doesn't judge you, right? Somebody who is going to be able to have empathy for you. I think that's a huge one. If you find that you're talking to somebody and they're trying to say, oh, well, at least you have a healthy baby, or you shouldn't feel that way, obviously that probably isn't a safe person to talk to, right? So it could be anybody that you just feel safe being completely open about how you're feeling. And like I said, if maybe you don't have anybody in your life like that, that's okay too. And maybe that's a good sign that maybe I need to reach out to a therapist or to a healthcare provider to really talk about this. Part of it is just really being able to talk about it and get empathy from somebody. Would you recommend these same coping mechanisms with PTSD? Um, PTSD is usually after some kind of really, it doesn't have to be really intense trauma, but any kind of trauma. It's how you perceived your birth. So maybe there wasn't a life-threatening emergency, but you felt like there was. It could trigger some kind of PTSD responses in fear and flashbacks and avoidance. Um, so PTSD, I would suggest probably getting some help from a therapist to be able to kind of coach you through those kinds of things. You want to really dose down and be able to use a lot more physical um, a lot of like breathing techniques, a lot of things to relax the body and the mind. So that would probably be a situation where maybe you would want to get some extra help from a healthcare provider. Um, but anybody who's experiencing any kind of avoidance or flashbacks, things like that, the key there would be to do a lot of like breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, things to help calm the body, to then also help calm the mind. How do I know if what I'm feeling is normal or something to be concerned about? So I think what's considered normal is really just subjective to what you've gone through, right? Like, again, this is such a huge shift and change in identity and such a huge developmental transition for not just you, but for your whole family. So I think I really say all feelings are okay. I think times to be concerned would be maybe if you're having thoughts of harming yourself, thoughts of harming your baby, um, some, or you're having trouble, like, taking care of duties, like getting out of bed and taking care of your children, those kinds of things. If we're feeling like we're really getting to that point where life is just, where depression or anxiety sometimes are debilitating and we're unable to kind of get through our day, then yeah, I think that that's a good point to reach out and ask for a little bit more support. And again, no shame in that. We have a lot of good treatments and things that can help. I think one of the biggest things is letting moms know that you will feel better no matter what happens. Like, you won't always feel this way, right? There's a lot of hormonal changes, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of lack of sleep. Like, it's this perfect storm. And then you add on a pandemic for any families going through this right now. It's so much stress. It's almost feels so overwhelming to deal with right now that it's okay to reach out for help, and it's okay, and you won't always feel this way. But this is hard right now. This is hard. Is it helpful to do these things even if I had my baby many years ago? Shouldn't I be over it by now? So, no, that's so not true. So, anytime is okay. I actually see a lot of moms that will come in and process more when they have toddlers. The first year or two is so hard. You're kind of in survival mode, right? And a lot of moms actually don't reach out for help right away. Some do, but some don't, and that's okay. I've actually talked with women who it's been decades since they have had a baby, and it's still on their mind, and it's still something that they're struggling with. So, yes, these are completely appropriate things to do if you had your baby many years ago. And it's okay if you don't feel over it. I think you just go with how you're feeling. If something is on your mind and it's not going away, it's usually a sign that your brain and your heart need a little bit more support to be able to process, make sense of it, and move forward. And that's completely okay. And you deserve that. You deserve that no matter how long ago it has been. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Monica. That was fantastic. And I really appreciate the time you put into this presentation and just really the affirmation that you give to new moms about and new parents in general, how difficult this is and how important it is to just recognize that it's okay to ask for help no matter what your circumstances are. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if anybody has, oh,
I just said thank you. That's all.
okay. If anybody has any further questions for Monica about this presentation that comes up, for the end of the presentation, go ahead and send them to Brianne, and we will make sure that those get to Monica. And we're hoping to have a bit of time, a few minutes at the end, where we can ask kind of any lingering questions and bring that information to you.